Okay, we are being recorded.
Okay, I think we're ready to go. Welcome to the January 11th, 2021 Lincoln County Planning Commission meeting. At this time, let's take roll call. Joshua?
Andre Bobbitt,
Here.
Perry Bugenhagen, Jalen Shatton,
Here.
okay. Judy Pelletier,
Here.
Bill Spolnick, Dick Cutler, Scarlett here,
Here.
Misty Lambert.
Here.
Thank you.
Hey, we do have a quorum. This is a continuation of hearing case file 20-C PC 20. At this time, we're going to have the Lincoln County Planner go over the steps leading up to this hearing and the procedures that we're going to be following. So John O'Leary.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So we received an application from Georgia Pacific on September 2nd of this past year. That application was for a landfill expansion. That application was initially received by the Planning Commission on November 23rd, along with all of its relevant exhibits. A staff report was prepared. The Planning Commission received that staff report as well. The applicant asked for a continuance prior to the November 23rd Planning Commission hearing. That continuance was granted by the Planning Commission till January 11th at their request. Since then, they have prepared additional materials and submitted those materials to the county for presentation to the Planning Commission tonight. There were 3 written documents. There's a written response to the questions that the Planning Commission formulated at the November 23rd hearing to the applicant, relevant to the application itself. The questions, or the answers to the questions, are written up in I think it's about 11 pages. Seemed pretty complete. I didn't see where they missed any of the questions that we formulated. The applicant included 2 exhibits with that document. One was a engineering report on seismic berm stability during a seismic event, and the other document was an analysis of the composition of the what they're referring to as the suspended solids associated with the sludge with the settling ponds. So apparently they don't feel that the word sludge is appropriate. That's something that came up in their submittal. There's a video presentation they prepared for the Planning Commission tonight. That video presentation will be played here shortly. It's about 30 minutes long. This is going to be a little bit of an experience with this. We'll see how this video plays over this platform. Hopefully it sounds, I think the audio will be good. I'm not sure about the video itself. But that's going to be the presentation tonight. At this point, this seems to be all of their submitted material. Planning Commission, Jerry should probably respond to this or comment on this. Planning Commission tonight, you're going to receive this material, and you're going to continue, or you're going to keep the record open for 7 days, come back at a later date and deliberate on this. It may be that you have additional questions tonight, and if you do, we'll talk about those questions. At this point, that's kind of the really fast summary. Are there any questions for me at this point? Carrying on.
John, I just want to let everyone know that just in case there's some latency problems with this video tonight, or in case you're interested, what we're going to do is we're going to have the URL for this posted online. We'll also email to each of you the URL for the GP presentation, so you don't even have to go looking for it. But if you wish, and if somehow it's less than satisfactory tonight, you can have a direct access to that URL, and the public will as well on our website, so they can watch this as well. If other people that are listening to this want to look at it, it's going to be posted, so it's important for people to know it'll be available.
Madam Chair, could I go over a few items?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. For the record, I'm Jerry Herbage. I'm an assistant legal counsel with Lincoln County. And we had a nice summary from John O'Leary, planner. I'd like to just emphasize a few things and to recap a little bit more what happened on the 23rd. So understand, and we explained this at the last meeting, but we live in a COVID world. And because of COVID, House Bill 4212 was passed by the Oregon legislature, and it authorizes governing bodies of public bodies to conduct public meetings and hearings using this type of technology. So this is being handled virtually as it was on the 23rd. There is no direct interfacing with the public, but the public will have and does have the opportunity to submit items in writing. And in line with that, as the Director of Planning and Development, Anno Husing, was saying, there is this live streaming that's going on, but this is also being made available in various formats for people to access the meeting. There may be a section, there may be an area where someone feels that there's they can chat, they can mark that, and then they can submit comments. We would ask that you not do that, and that you submit your comments to the planning department in writing. If you do the chat thing, that may get missed. And really what we're doing is this format, which is to submit things in writing so that the Planning Commission can see what the issues are and what your concerns are. I would also like to just briefly mention what happened on the 23rd. On that date, the Planning Commission did convene. The case was introduced. The staff went through the applicable decision criteria, so we don't need to do that again. And also, we went over the raise it or waive it criterion, which is basically that testimony should be directed to basically the decision criteria, the code, statute, administrative rule, which party believes applies to the relevant request, and that failure to raise an issue in a hearing accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the commission opportunity to respond precludes appeal to LUBA on that. So we went over the raise it or waive it thing, and there was a call for ex parte contacts, bias, and conflicts of interest. And as John O'Leary indicated, there was a motion for this to be continued until January 11th, which we have done. The Planning Commission did go through the staff report, and that was the major thing, or one of the major things that went on that day, plus the submittal of a number of questions which have been addressed by Georgia Pacific. So if there's any questions, or if you feel I missed something, let me know. But that is basically the background, supplemental to what John said in a nutshell.
All right. Well, thank you for that, Jerry. Okay, so at this time, just want to restate that the applicable criteria for the application have already, during our last hearing, been read into the record. And I'd like to ask if there's any planning commissioners that have had any ex parte communications regarding this since the November 23rd meeting.
No.
Okay, seeing none, we're gonna start and prepare to watch this video. So please, write down your questions, and these will be, we'll discuss questions with staff after the video.
And guys, it's a half hour long. So that's the length.
Okay, let's roll it.
So far, can everybody hear that?
Hear what?
The video?
I hear nothing from the video.
Okay.
We can't hear anything. I can't hear anything on mine, so.
Josh, hang on, I'll come back here just give me a second, okay?
Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing technical difficulties. Please hang in there for a minute.
Good.
Was I on the wrong monitor? Because last time I had it on this one. We're sharing my screen.
See it now. And we didn't even see it before, Josh.
Okay, let's try this just for a few seconds.
We're making progress.
I'm Allison Reynolds with Stoll Reeves, and I'm a land use attorney.
Can anybody hear that?
in Georgia.
Barely.
We appreciate the opportunity to present the project to you this evening and respond to questions raised during the previous hearing. Also with me today are Don Dodson and Christy Dudeman, both with engineering firm Wood PLC.
That help?
Don will be presenting on a seismic evaluation and mitigation at the site, and Christy will be presenting information about the sludge material that commissioners requested.
Go back and do this. You can hear it?
Was everybody able to hear that?
Heads are nodding. I could hear it. Yeah. Andrew's got a thumb up. Yep.
Yes, I hear.
That was
Okay.
good. Okay. We're good now.
Okay,
So we going back to the beginning? Is that the plan now to?
sure.
Okay. Everybody ready? Here we go.
Here we go.
Commissioners, I'm Allison Reynolds with Stoll Reeves, and I'm a land use attorney for the applicant Georgia Pacific. We appreciate the opportunity to present the project to you this evening and respond to questions raised during the previous hearing. Also with me today are Don Dodson and Christy Dudeman, both with engineering firm Wood PLC. Don will be presenting on a seismic evaluation and mitigation at the site, and Christy will be presenting information about the sludge material that commissioners requested. Before we explain the more technical aspects of the application and address your previously submitted questions, I would like to introduce CJ Drake, who is the Public Affairs Manager at the Georgia Pacific Board Mill in Toledo. CJ will provide some brief background on the mill's history and operations.
Good evening. I'm CJ Drake, Public Affairs Manager at the Georgia Pacific Board Mill in Toledo, and I've worked here since August 2015. I'm pleased to present this recorded testimony in support of our conditional use permit application. Because of the mill's close proximity to the city of Toledo, we must always be mindful of the impact of our operations on the people who live here. We must earn and never take for granted the right to operate in Toledo and Lincoln County. Here's some background on Toledo Mill. We have been a proud partner in Lincoln County's economic progress since we began operating here in 1958. The product we make is container board, which is the brown paper and packaging boxes that are used by millions of consumers every day. The mill employs about 360 people on an annual payroll of approximately $45 million. We are also Lincoln County's biggest taxpayer. Our current tax bill is more than $3.3 million. The county's second largest taxpayer pays less than half. The mill is a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week operation. We produce about 2,600 tons of container board every day. Our product is shipped by truck and rail to factories across the nation for conversion into boxes, many of which are used to package food products. We are the leading recycler of old corrugated containers and pre-consumer box trimmings on the West Coast, currently recycling 450,000 tons a year into new container board. The project that's the subject of the application you are considering is of high importance to the mill, and without it, we cannot operate efficiently or competitively. Allow me to clarify a few important points about the project. First, we wish to make it clear that the project does not involve the disposal of toxic waste, human waste, household garbage, mill garbage, or biosolids. Second, the project area has been used for the same purpose for decades. What we are proposing is entirely consistent with the area's historic and current purpose. Finally, everything we do and plan to do is permitted and regulated by various government agencies. For example, our wastewater treatment system is governed by our National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System permit and our solid waste permit, both of which are granted by the state. We've engaged consultants, engineers, and experts, and we've invested a lot of time and resources into identifying the best way forward. We've discussed a few options and alternatives for this project, none of which is practical or acceptable. One option is the possibility of hauling this material to an off-site landfill. As we previously explained to you in writing, this alternative will not require county approval. In order to serve the same purpose as the project, the same 700,000 cubic feet of material that the project would dispose of on-site would need to be trucked off-site to the nearest landfill that could handle it, which is in Corvallis. This would require approximately 50,000 round trips made by trucks traveling 100 miles per trip. As the industrial hub for Lincoln County, Toledo experiences heavier truck traffic than most communities in the region. Such traffic is consistently and historically one of the leading concerns expressed by residents and public officials who represent the community. Just as significant would be the increased carbon emissions released into the environment from such traffic. It's indisputable that this off-site trucking alternative would aggravate those concerns. Therefore, in the interest of being a good neighbor and out of respect for the environment, we strongly prefer the project to the undesirable alternative of hauling the material off-site. After much study and analysis, it's our position that the project for which we are seeking approval is the best option for everyone, the mill, the community, and the environment. In that spirit, I respectfully encourage you to support the application. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, CJ. To begin with my part, we want to orient the commissioners to the site. This image shows the site as it exists today. This is GP's mill on the east side of the river within the city of Toledo. These are wastewater treatment ponds associated with the mill. This is GP's existing industrial landfill area, which is within the county and on the west side of the river. This is the 30-acre settling pond, and this is the 15-acre settling pond, which is the subject of our application today. This aerial image shows where the proposed project will be placed on the site. This is the 30-acre settling pond, which will not change from its current configuration. The commissioners asked about the separation berm shown in the 30-acre settling pond in our original materials. That will not be added as part of the project, and we've corrected that in the record to show this pond will remain as it is today. This wet area here is the remaining portion of the existing 15-acre settling pond. This area is the new cell where materials removed from the settling ponds will be stored in dry form. To answer questions raised by commissioners, we want to also explain the purpose of the project. The mill uses water to create container board from a combination of recycled fiber, such as old corrugated containers, and wood chips. After the water is used, it is sent to a wastewater treatment area adjacent to the mill that utilizes a series of basins and treatment technologies to clean the wastewater. A major element of the treatment process consists of separating solid residuals, the small wood and paper particles, from the water before the cleared water can be discharged. The solid residuals build up in the treatment basin over time, requiring their removal roughly every 3 years. This periodic basin maintenance is accomplished by sending the material from the basins to the 15 and 30-acre settling ponds, where the solids settle out from the water. Once the solids settle out, the water is returned to the basins before ultimate discharge. The settled material, referred to as sludge or settled solids, accumulates over time in the 15 and 30-acre ponds. Eventually, inevitably, these settling ponds reach a critical solids level where the saturation of solids in the ponds is too high to allow effective separation of the solids from the water, which is what's beginning to happen at GP's facility now. This situation has occurred through GP's normal operations of the facility and is not due to an increase in production or any changes of mill operations. Today, GP has been able to maintain adequate volume within the 15 and 30-acre ponds by dispersing the settled solids within and between the two ponds to ensure continued operation of the mill's wastewater treatment system and associated basins. However, the volume of settled solids in the ponds will very soon reach a critical point, which is why GP is proposing this project. Given that the issue before GP is that the settling ponds will soon run out of capacity to handle more solids, it may seem counterintuitive that GP is proposing to eliminate some of its pond area off the site, since this will decrease the overall settling pond capacity. However, this solution works because the amount of solids that can be stored in an area when dry far exceeds the amount of solids that can occupy the same area when the solids are within a pond. By converting a portion of the 15-acre pond area into dry storage, the project actually creates more functional capacity in the pond during the 50-year project. We also want to touch on the regulatory framework for the project, since there were some questions from commissioners. The 15 and 30-acre ponds are part of GP's overall wastewater treatment system and were authorized several decades ago. DEQ regulates the treatment system, including the ponds, under its wastewater permitting program, and today storage of the wet settled solids within the ponds is regulated under the mill's DEQ wastewater permit. GP's current proposal, however, is to store these same settled solids in dry form on site, outside the pond. When GP approached DEQ about the proposed change, DEQ determined it would regulate the settled solids in the new storage area as solid waste by adding a cell to the existing landfill, which DEQ also regulates. Importantly, whether under DEQ's wastewater program or DEQ's solid waste program, the agency ultimately will maintain regulatory oversight over the project's design and implementation, and thereby ensure it poses no risk to human health or the environment. As a prerequisite to DEQ modifying GP's existing landfill permit at the solids area, DEQ requires us to obtain local land use approvals first from you. However, permitting from DEQ must also be completed before the project can ultimately move forward. We also think it's important to discuss the alternative. What happens if GP cannot move forward with the project as it's proposed? If the project is not approved, GP could instead transport the settled solids off-site to the closest existing solid waste facility that is permitted by DEQ to accept this material, which is in Corvallis. This alternative would not require land use permits and would not fall under this commission's jurisdiction. To provide the same operational capacity as the project, 50 years of pond operations, the same 700,000 cubic feet of settled solids that the project would handle on-site would instead need to be trucked to the Corvallis landfill. This would require approximately 50,000 round trips made by trucks traveling 100 miles per trip during the 50-year project period. This offsite alternative to the project would still require removal of settled solids from the wastewater treatment ponds, which will include some of the same potential for noise, odor, and visual impacts as the project.
Well, do we gotta,
I've lost audio.
well, can we wait, Josh, or who's, John, somebody did something and sound is not there?
He muted him accidentally.
I'll now turn this over to Christy Deitman with Wood to discuss a further evaluation of the solids material that we put together in response to the Commission's question.
Wood collected samples of the settled solids for laboratory testing of 8 metals and 19 chemical substances known as polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, or PAHs, that are likely to be present in settled solids. PAHs are typically produced from incomplete combustion of wood or other fossil fuel sources and can be found naturally in the environment, as are metals. The samples we collected were from multiple locations and depths across the ponds to evaluate the solids that have accumulated in the 30-acre pond over time. We compared the detected metals and PAHs from the settled solids against published human health and ecological risk screening criteria. The human health screening criteria were selected to evaluate the settled solids in its current disposition upland. And ecological screening criteria were selected to evaluate a hypothetical release of the solids to the river. The pHs that were detected do not exceed the occupational and construction worker levels, meaning they do not pose a risk to anyone working in or around the solids. The concentration of benzoate and anthracene at one sampling location slightly exceeded residential leaching to groundwater levels. However, the existing ponds include a protected clay lining to prevent releases to groundwater. This liner will remain and protect against any leaching from the settled solids area. No individually detected pHs exceeded the most conservative published state of Oregon ecological risk screening criteria, which could be applied to ecosystems found in the river. Metals were detected in all the samples we analyzed. The detected metals are also naturally occurring in the soil and in the trees used to manufacture pulp. And we compared the levels we detected in the settled solids to the state of Oregon published background concentrations for the Coast Range soils. For the most part, the metals we detected were below the naturally occurring background concentrations for human health. However, lead detected in one sea sample exceeded the background concentration, but it did not exceed the applicable occupational and construction worker receptors. In some samples, lead exceeded the levels for leaching to groundwater. However, this does not actually mean that lead will contaminate groundwater during a release. We conducted additional testing to determine if, during a release, lead could actually leach to groundwater. These additional tests show that levels of lead that were capable of leaching to groundwater are not detected. Arsenic, cadmium, chromium, lead, and mercury exceeded the most conservative published state of Oregon screening values in one or more samples for a freshwater setting. So a theoretical release of solids material to the river could potentially result in minor adverse effects to invertebrate benthic organisms. However, as the GP team will discuss through the presentation, the project involves several protective measures and mitigation to ensure that the settled solids will not ever enter the river or groundwater. The project is designed to safely store the solids in a solid waste cell designed for this exact material. With these protections incorporated, the project does not pose a risk to human health or ecological receptors.
Thank you, Christy. Next, we want to discuss the protective measures Christy alluded to that are included as part of the project and ensure that the settled solids will not reach groundwater or the river. Groundwater is protected from contact with the solids by an existing clay lining in the pond. GP will retain that lining in the storage area. So the lining prevents any moisture that could accumulate in the solids from infiltrating groundwater. Groundwater monitoring wells at the site, shown here, are routinely sampled and analyzed to ensure there is not contamination from the ponds or the existing landfill, and this monitoring will continue on the site. Storm water that runs off of the storage area will be captured by the site's extensive drainage system and sent back to the wastewater treatment area. The berm is an additional physical barrier between the solids and the river and prevents runoff water from reaching the river. Next, we want to address commissioner questions about project construction. Construction periods, when settled solids are removed from the ponds and placed in the dry storage area, will never last more than 6 months, though GP anticipates a more likely time frame is actually 3 to 4 months each time. Construction phases will occur roughly 10 years apart during the 50-year project time frame. GP will also continue its current maintenance of the wastewater treatment ponds between phases, which includes removing the solids, also referred to as dredging, from the wastewater treatment ponds and placing them into the 15 and 30-acre ponds approximately every 3 years, which occurs today. This maintenance activity is ongoing and will not be impacted by the project. The initial construction will involve draining both ponds and preparing the solid storage area. Solids will be removed from the settling ponds, dried, and stacked in the storage area, and GP will then plant bricks on the area to control erosion. Each later phase will involve draining 30-acre ponds, removing wet solids, drying the solids, placing the dried solids on the storage area, and replanting the grass. This rendering depicts the solids area as per. Commissioners also raised concerns about whether the project is suitable for the site. The question of suitability must evaluate the difference between the existing use on the site and what is proposed. Here, the exact settled solids material that exists in the 15-acre pond will still be placed in that same area. The only difference is that the material is wet today, but will be dry after the project is completed. We We recognize, however, that seismic hazards at the site, which are present along the entire Oregon coast, combined with the site's proximity to the river, raise suitability concerns for the ship. I'm now going to turn this over to Don Dawson with Wood to discuss the additional seismic analysis we conducted and the mitigation we are proposing to ensure the settled solids will not enter the river, even during catastrophic Cascadia earthquake events.
Thank you, Allison. Let's talk a little bit about the geotechnical and the earthquake and seismic parts of this project. So we've gone out and we've done some exploration, we've conducted lab tests, we've done analyses, and we've broken the project up into 3 reaches based upon the subsurface conditions and also based on the geometry of the berm at these particular locations. So we've broken it up into reach 1, reach 2, and reach 3. And then we looked at the seismic events that are likely based upon the geology of the area, specifically the Cascadia magnitude earthquakes. For this particular project, most of the project will be in the area of reach 1 and reach 2, but we went ahead and evaluated reach 3 as well, just for completeness. So let's take a look at the geometry of the project. So here we have a view looking upriver to the west, to the east. And notice that out here in the river, we've got a sandbar. And we've got the toe of the berm down here at the same elevation of the sandbar. It goes up at a inclination of about 3 to 1, something like that. And the distance from the toe of the berm where it meets the river and the top crest of the berm where the road is about 70 feet. I mean, this is important. We've got a buffer zone that's about 75 feet from the top of the berm out to the toe of the proposed solid area that it's already existing, but we're going to be adding to it. And from there, going up to the crest, we're at a little bit over 200 feet. And the important thing about this particular geometry is that the crest of the solids is far enough away from the berm that it really doesn't have an impact on the stability. So let's look at some of these reaches and get into some more detail about what the earthquake could be doing to these particular berms. So we looked at 3 different earthquakes, all Cascadia events. We looked at an event that would be a fairly small event, 7.76 magnitude earthquake, all the way up to a full Cascadia 9.1 event. And we had different return periods for these earthquakes. A return period is the amount of time that you would expect in between these events to occur. So, for example, a 250-year earthquake would be the size of an earthquake that you would expect once every 250 years. And the same all the way up to the 2,500-year earthquake. That's an earthquake that you would expect to happen at least once every 2,500 years. So when we evaluated the displacement of a berm, and this is the actual vertical displacement, how much the berm would drop during a earthquake of the magnitude that we're looking at, we see that for a small earthquake, the 250-year earthquake, we only have about an inch or less of vertical deformation. And that's not really bad. And it stays pretty low all the way until you get up to the 2,500-year earthquake, where the deformation in the vertical direction up and down is about 2.2 feet. Now, this is not a particular problem because the distance between the top of the solids and the top of the berm is over 3 feet. 3 feet's the minimum there. So a deformation of a couple of feet is not a problem, especially because the solid material that we're containing behind the berm is dry. There's no liquid that can leak out and actually damage the berm or cause a breach. And it's both stable in its current condition and also during the maximum earthquake that we would expect it to ever see. Reach 2 is very similar. The full Cascadia event, the 2,500-year event, has a little bit more deformation all the way up to 2.6 feet versus 2.2. But still, that's within an acceptable limit, given that the amount of freeboard, the distance from the surface of the solids up to the top of the berm, that was not a problem. go to section 1. Section 1 is the least stable and has the worst subsurface conditions that we observed when we did our exploration. And so the 2,500-year event has a deformation all the way up to about 6 feet. This is a little excessive, so we're probably going to have to do some mitigation to take that into account and fix that. So let's talk a little bit about the different methods that we can use to mitigate this problem. So here's a cross section that shows the solids, the berm, and then this circular line here that goes all the way out to the river is the most probable line of deformation or line of weakness that we have in the soil. And so this is where we would expect to see a rotation and a displacement of a couple of feet as the earthquake hits. So the way to mitigate that is to insert these structural elements here, showing 3 just for illustrative purposes. We even have to determine the exact number by doing the full design. We intersect the failure plane and we cut off the ability of this particular rotational area to actually rotate during the earthquake. So here's the method that we do. We're going to use a technique called vibro-compaction. Sometimes it's called vibro-replacement. There's lots of different variations on this one particular construction technique to improve the strength of the ground. And we'll do this in accordance with the Oregon Department of Transportation Seismic Mitigation Guidelines. So let's run a little film here, and I'll talk about it as we go through. It shows how this works. So we have a piece of equipment. This is a crane, and the equipment that's being lowered into the ground is called a vibro flot. And the vibro flot has an eccentric motor in there that causes it to vibrate at a high frequency. And as it's lowered into the ground, it actually pushes the soil out of the way. Then they bring in additional soil, in this case sand, and the sand is allowed to drop into the hole. Vibro flot will go back down and strengthen the sand, and it'll improve the ground and actually prevent the rotation and the deformation that we discussed.
Thank you, Don. We are planning to include this seismic mitigation as part of the project, but recognize that the Commission may wish to condition the project's approval on this mitigation being completed. We would accept a condition of approval setting a maximum deformation for berm reach 1. We've included language for a proposed condition of approval in our written materials and also shared this with county staff. So finally, we want to address questions about the potential for odors, dust, noise, and visual impacts from the project. Regarding odors, the settled solids are composed of wood and paper particles. As true for all organic materials, the solids can produce odors when they're disturbed. The project has the potential to emit odors as the solids are removed from the ponds and relocated to the storage area during construction. This potential for odor already exists every 3 years when the solids material is removed from the wastewater treatment ponds and placed in the 15 and 30-acre ponds. The mill notifies residents when this maintenance activity occurs and encourages citizens to notify the mill of any odor concern. The mill maintains a 24-hour call-in number for mill-related concerns of any kind, which will be maintained. If odors occur as part of this project, GP will treat the material with BioWish odor control, a biologic designed for odor treatment of the types of solids found in the pond. Regarding dust, GP does not anticipate this project will create dust since the settled solids are wet and once dry will be planted with grass. However, construction vehicles may create dust coming to and from the site. GP uses water sprayers to control dust for all of its operations and will utilize these for the project as needed. Regarding noise, the project's construction phases, which will last 6 months or less and will occur approximately every 10 years, will require construction vehicles. However, it's important to note that even if the off-site hauling alternative was chosen instead of the project, which would not require approval from this commission, construction vehicles would still be needed, but that option would also add significant traffic costs. Since we cannot eliminate construction noise, GP will agree to limit construction equipment use to daylight hours only in order to further control the time period during which project noise is present. Finally, some concerns were raised about visual impacts. We do not anticipate new impacts from the project due to the existing barriers and natural topography. We put together some slides showing homes in various areas and how these existing features ensure the views are not impacted. An existing row of trees shown here blocks views of the existing landfill area and will also block the project site from the homes in this vicinity. Homes in this area are shielded both by the trees and an elevation difference. The homes are at a higher elevation than the project, which further obscures the view. We also captured views from nearby individual homes near the site. This photograph shows the view from the home at 327 South Bay. This home, like others in its vicinity, is shielded by existing trees and the home is at a higher elevation, which obscures the project from view. This photograph shows the view from a home which is similar to others in its vicinity. The project is obscured by trees and the home is at a higher elevation, further blocking views of the project. Finally, there are several homes located across the river from the project. Views from this area are at grade. Although screening isn't possible because it could compromise the integrity of the burned plant trees in that area, the view itself from these homes will not change significantly with the project. The settled solids will be terraced and appear almost identical to the view today, but with added grass. In conclusion, thank you for the opportunity to present this information. We hope we've helped answer your questions, and we also urge you to review our written submission, which includes responses to all questions during the last hearing. We've spent many months analyzing all available options, and we firmly believe the project is the best solution for all concerned, the community, the company, and the environment. We urge your support and welcome any additional questions you may have.
Okay, well, visuals certainly help all those meeting packets, materials that we have obtained up till now. At this point in time, commissioners can ask questions to staff. And I believe if we have questions, if there's any concerns regarding the presentation, those will be relayed to GP. Maybe John could be shaking affirmatively. So at this time, commissioners, you have now further questions from our last meeting regarding this new material. Judy, I see you are unmuted. Do you have a question?
I'm just curious what the BioWish contains or is made of. The odor control BioWish.
I've never heard of, I don't know anything about BioWish.
I don't either, so that's why I'm just curious.
Right. I think, so odor is a concern of yours.
Well, yes, it emanates all over Toledo to some extent. So it would be interesting to know how they apply this, how it works, and what it consists of.
Right. I also had some questions about odor, but is there do you have anything further on that, or is there anyone else with an odor question? Okay. I just want to be clear on when the odor occurs. In their materials, they state that when they're moving things, moving the solids is when it's smelly. Not being a resident right of that area, I'm aware of sometimes that, there's a big odor emanating in parts, depending which way the wind blows and everything. But is this 3-year odor when they're transferring things? That's something that's been going on and something that will continue to go on. And then there's the question that's separate from the 6 months construction phase where they're moving a lot of this solid. Is that a 6 months full of odor with this BioWish applied to it. And then if the project, if the conditional use isn't approved, where is this odor? Is that part of the trucks, or is it every 3 years that the trucks go by? I would like that to be nailed down as far as timelines and, you know, the differences in these odor, the odor problem. I don't know if staff has any idea, can elaborate on that right now, or if that's a question.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't have any information on that, but we can forward that question on to the applicant and see if they can respond back. I think it's your question is generally, you know, when has odor occurred in the past? What were the conditions that caused it? And what's basically, is it relating to the trucks or the actual digging, or what are the activities that are generating? Is that the question?
Yeah, it just is this construction process going to be a big odor generator? Is it going to, and then is it still the same otherwise? Versus if it doesn't happen and there's no solid waste disposal site, and then the ponds are becoming, those settling ponds are unusable, and then they're trucking this stuff. Is that odoriferous?
Sure. I can formulate that question, get it to the applicant, and see if they can come back with a more detailed explanation of what events, what activities generate odor, maybe a better explanation of what is actually causing the odor.
Okay.
Yeah, okay, got it.
Okay, it looks like Shaylin has a question.
Yeah, and it's related to the same thing. There seems to be, in my mind, some confusion about, we've said that there's going to be odor every 3 years, and then they said that the construction is going to take place every 10 years, and then, you know, how many years are left on the current project timeline. None of this, it's kind of confusing to know what these odor and noise impacts are going to happen in a real world situation. Does that make sense?
I guess we can add that to the odor question, John. You were muted, so I couldn't hear what you were saying.
Sure, yeah, that makes sense, Commissioner Stratton. Do you want to narrow the question down to specific activities or specific?
Well, if we're just talking about odor, they specifically mentioned that there would be an odor issue every 3 years. They also said that there would be construction every 10 years. So the question is, what are the actual effects, like Andre was saying, that would cause the odor, and how do those relate to the 3-year timeline, the 10-year timeline, the 6-month timeline, explaining how how is that going to really affect things, rather than this overall statement of it's going to cause, odor issues.
Yeah, okay, so if I ask the applicant or relate to the applicant, can you give us an inventory of activities or events that cause the odor and in relationship to their projected timelines associated with the project, and they anticipate these other events to occur?
Yeah, that would take care of it.
Okay.
And I would say you have to keep in mind that ongoing activities now for the last 50 years or whatever have generated odors. It's a fact of life here. And so, it's not something that's new, a new phenomenon.
Okay, any other questions? Shaylin, do you have another question?
I do. The application that they put in and the responses to our questions from the last meeting all cite the 50,000 truck trips in the 50-year project life, I'd like to know how many truck trips would actually occur daily or weekly if the settled solids expansion isn't approved. It's kind of hard to understand what the actual impact would be on a regular basis when it's only projected for the entire 50-year period. That's it.
John's nodding that he's got that.
I got that. Yeah. So how many truck trips broken down daily, weekly, are we talking about with 50,000 truck trips? What dates or what approximate times are we talking about these trucks operating and how many a day, that type of activity?
Yeah, they indicated that they work 24/7. So I'm assuming that those truck trips are going to occur on a daily basis. But we really don't know how to compare the truck trips if the project isn't approved to the truck trips that would occur during construction and after construction.
Okay,
Okay.
all right. Other questions?
I have a couple questions.
Okay.
Questions. Throughout the information we've been provided with, we've got a lot of emphasis on the clay liner that is in the pond. But I don't know that I've seen anywhere where we have any idea how that clay liner is going to respond to a seismic event. So unless somebody's seen something I haven't seen. So I have a little concern about how the clay liner will respond in a seismic event. The other thing that I found was there was some questions from Oregon Department of Land Conservation and Development, Elisa Phillips. And the reports have dealt an awful lot with seismic events. But I don't know, I might be missing, are they telling us about liquefaction? They're saying there's a possibility there, but I don't know if we've got a clear picture of whether liquefaction can happen or not happen and what's going to happen at that juncture.
I can sort of answer that question. They sort of answered the question. Their seismic report. I read that today. You got that email to you today, so you probably haven't had a chance to digest it and read it yet.
What do you think?
Okay, so
above me.
Okay, so the Exhibit B, which is not, I mean, it's an engineering report, so it's a little convoluted, but they did some testing. They determined there was a potential for liquefaction under these reaches they described, these berms. And I don't want to try and explain the methodology or the science. It's not my thing, but the report, at least from what I can determine, is they agreed that there's potential for liquefaction, or at least they agreed that the conservative estimate is there will be liquefaction during a seismic event on those berms. That's the way they stated in the report. They are assuming that that's going to happen. Although I kind of read out of the report, they had two different testing methods, and it seemed like they kind of conflicted with each other. So they went with a more conservative estimate, assuming that there's going to be some liquefaction. So that's their estimate. So that's the applicant's engineer saying with the liquefaction.
But that relates, does it not, to the berms? Maybe the separate question that was being asked had to do with the liner where the materials were going to be stored, if I understood that right.
Yes, you're correct. And that's a good clarification, because I didn't see any indication that they tested the area underneath the, underneath the ponds where the clay liner is, so.
Okay, so
Yeah.
take note of that question from the planning commission so that could be directed. And while I'm speaking, if that's okay, Madam Chair, I just wanted to say, when we had their presentation, their video presentation, we had a technical difficulty for it looked like less than a minute, but so can we make the full thing available? So if someone just was following along, that might have been a blank space for them. So can we make sure that any interested party and the planning commission has the full video without the interruption, even though it was short?
We will send, like I said earlier, we'll make a point of sending the URL directly to everybody, all the planning commissioners. So all you got to do is click on it, and it'll, wait a minute or two, let it download onto your machine, and you'll be able to run it yourself. So you can hear it again. And it will be on the website. Casey's we're gonna make sure it's all that URL is also available so the public can watch it as well.
Okay. Scarlett, do you have another question?
I did, on the last meeting, Phil kind of touched on ODF&W being contacted on this, and throughout the report, they refer to let's say the metals that could go into the river. They could cause some issues with clams. Well, clams are one thing. Downriver, we have oysters, we have crabs, to say nothing of everything that is feeding off these clams that could be damaged by the metals that could be released.
So was the, you did look at the materials provided today and part of the presentation, they were talking about the metals, but do you want more are you asking for ODF&W to comment on this?
If somebody can, all that information is way, way, way above me, okay? So as far as we know that there's chemicals that could be released and that they did comment that there could be a danger to clams. Well, there's a lot of things that feed on clams in that river.
I think more of an EPA question rather than an ODFW question. I don't think
that would be a good point. That's
ODFW deals with that stuff.
That would be good. Yeah.
So John, I don't know if DEQ contacts those two agencies. I don't know what the path is in that. I know that when this is first written that you contact all the agencies. So if there's any more information.
So, yeah, Madam Chair.
It just seems that the appropriate protocol would be to address that question. Please elaborate. You said that the clams could be affected. We're aware, or, it's been addressed that other animals eat the clams and so on. So direct it, I think, to the applicant to give the answer rather than for staff to go out of the record and so on and drag some things in. So I think it's appropriate for the applicant to respond to that.
But Scarlett, since you're a relatively new planning commissioner, because I was on the planning commission for many years, there are times when your job as planning commissioners is made difficult because you're presented with, and I know Andrew's been around for a long time on the commission too, I remember there were times when on the planning commission, we were provided technical information on remember, for cell phone towers with RF frequencies, it would be basically pages and pages of numbers that we were that unless you were an RF engineer, radio frequency engineer, there was no way that we could take that information as lay planning commissioners and understand it. And I think the same thing happens with some geological reports. We're left to, it's difficult because a project of this scale with the potential impacts and the scientific questions available, this is really quite a different matter than a planning commission is normally used to attend to. And again, because we're at the beginning of this process, as was pointed out last planning commission meeting, we don't really have access to EISs and other kinds of documentation and analysis done by other agencies at this stage in the process. Why do I say all that? I think it provides a dilemma for this body to be able to take this information and at times really understand exactly what to do. So I just think that's important to note that that for some of you, and I don't blame you, it's difficult just to understand exactly what they're saying or not saying. And it's just, I just want to note that for the record, that's an inherent dilemma to an application of this scale and complexity.
Well, this is Jerry, and I think that's the job for the applicant to make that understood by those who are going to be making the decision. So I think the question was to clarify, and so if John could note that question to clarify the issue regarding the clams and that other animals eat the clams, and how have they analyzed that? And then if there are other issues that seem a little fairly technical, maybe the applicant can clarify those if they come up with questions.
But I think that ultimately has to be the challenge. And at the end of the day, when you're all faced with making a decision, it goes back to the issue of do you have enough information to apply the criteria and to make that work. So I think Jerry, you are absolutely right. There isn't a place in our process at this point to reach out to other agencies and to start bringing in new information. We're going to have to, at this point, rely on Georgia Pacific to make this understandable to you and to connect these dots. That's part of their burden as applicant, to provide substantial evidence on the record.
I will say, in my previous occupation, as laboratory technician, and I worked a lot with metals and some with PAHs, and that's by accumulation of or uptake of. In that case, it was for developing tests for ocean outfalls from sewage treatment plants. But in doing that, I learned that, first of all, your organic matter in your biosolids hangs on to the metals pretty heavily. So they have to leach over a long period of time for them to lose the metal over time, or to lose it significantly, unless it's acidic water. And what I read in most of this report is that most of the concentrations are below or at background levels. So that means that those clams are not picking up or will not pick up anything more than what is normal.
Okay.
There were 2 or 3 samples, I think, that were above, but it still didn't come above their SL2, and I wasn't sure what SL2 meant.
So perhaps again, we'll just get a little clarification on this, and because we don't want to get into deliberating
No.
the
Right, no, we don't deliberate now.
see if GP will clarify that there's statements about the metals and
Yes.
the potential there. Would that be doable, John?
So I'm gonna ask the applicant to clarify the information they provided regarding metals. And
Also, what does SL2 mean?
Yes.
SL2 mean? Is that basically the question? Is clarify the statement regarding metals and what does SL2 mean?
Is that Scarlett, with that, and Judy clarify things for you?
You know, I will tell you guys that I'm very grateful to what Judy just told me.
Okay.
She's got,
We're not deliberating and we need to base our decision based on the record.
Right.
So let's concentrate on, and not extraneous, and to concentrate on any questions that we have and then move on.
But they could define SL2. Yes.
Okay. I think, okay, so now two people with questions. First was Shaylin and then Misty.
A quick question regarding that clay underlayment. On previous projects I've worked, there has been a concern that continuous exposure of the clay barriers can become saturated and need to be replaced. So I would ask that the applicant let us know if they are going to need to replace the liner in the remaining 15 acres, I believe, that they're leaving for solid, whether that is going to be replaced, left as it is, and if so, when that might have to occur.
Like, what is the lifespan of the clay liner that they're using for this solid?
Exactly, and if it needs to be replaced, when would that probably occur, and what would be the what work would need to be done during that time that might reflect on our mitigation measures, or their recommended mitigation measures, I guess I should say.
Okay. John, did you get that all? Okay. Misty, did you have a question?
And maybe I don't think I read it, but I just want to clarify or ask. So this is a 50-year project. It's going to last a significant amount of time to happen. This is going to happen, and then this is going to happen. So it's like a 50-year project. Is there deadlines between when phase 1, when phase 2? So every 3 years this is going to happen for 50 years? I mean, is there any deadlines between this construction?
Yeah, what I believe what they stated is that it's a 6 months construction, but then there's something that happens every 10 years, but we can get that nailed down, and the lifespan total of the project being 50 years, but that's just my reading of it, so maybe we could get that timeline clarified. And I think my very first question was regarding with the smelting was, what's going on every 3 years? Like so there's a 3-year thing, a 10-year thing, a 6-month thing. Let's maybe nail this down, the time frame for the whole thing. At the end of 50 years, what happens? It's project over.
Well, I guess what I'm also kind of understanding in this is if it takes, I don't remember the number, but if it takes so many truckloads to get this stuff out of here, over across to Corvallis or wherever they're going to take it, if this is not approved, is that many truckloads in 3 years? Is that so many every 3 years? What is that? I don't understand the timeline to make this happen, and how we're going to be affected, how the community is going to be affected by the construction over different phases of this and different periods of this. if it's a 50-year project and we're moving 500,000 trucks, so maybe that's only 50 trucks a year. I don't understand.
Okay. John, do you
Yeah.
understand?
Does that make a logical question?
Yeah, let me clarify something. So if the project's approved, my understanding based on the application, I'm fairly confident in this, is that there's just not going to be any significant truck traffic. So if the application's not approved, you're going to have if they have to truck material to Corvallis, you're going to have the same construction, so to speak. You're going to have excavation of the material to be placed in the trucks, and then you're going to be disturbing the solids that are in the ponds. You're going to have trucks, so it's reasonable to conclude you're going to have the odor effect and the other things that go along with that, as well as the trucks. And so so your question is when is this truck activity going to take place, and what's the duration? What's the intensity of the traffic? If I understand the question correctly, is it going to be X number of trucks every day, 365 days a year, or for 50 years, or is that not the question? Okay.
What is the time period for each phase of the construction? So is it this phase of for 3 years, every 3 years they're going to do something? If we approve this, they're going to do something. How long is the something they're going to do every 3 years take? Does that take 6 months every 3 years? Does it take 2 months every 3 years? Does it take a year every 3 years? How much is that so every 3 years they do something, they have to do something in their project. How long does that 3 year, whatever it is they're doing in the 3 years take?
My understanding was it will take 6 months or less time to excavate these ponds, settle out the solids, dig up the solids and put them in the landfill. I don't know how long that would take, but that would happen every 10 years or 50 years when the ponds fill up.
Okay, so 6 months every 10 years.
Yeah, 6 months or less, they said. Could be three or four. 6 months or less every 10 years.
Right. Okay, so that was my understanding as well. Is that your understanding, John? Or do we need to clarify that with them?
No, that's correct. That's
Okay.
what I got out of the application. Sure.
When they every 3 years, they were going to, I have to look at the thing, what they called it. Every 3 years.
They move things from the wastewater to the something. There is something every 3 years. I don't remember what.
How long does that take?
That's the current activity. So every
Right.
3 years right now, but what they're doing right now every 3 years is they're removing solids from the ponds. I don't know how long that takes. It's not part of the application because it's the current operational step.
Just that every 10 years, you got 6 months of construction going on in Toledo. Is that correct?
Yeah, based on the application, if approved, then they're stating every 10 years, 6 months or less.
Trying to clarify that. Okay, I'm good. I don't have a question.
Okay.
Okay.
Other questions? I always have the last question, don't I? I always have questions. I have one more for them, John. So the application is going from a wastewater to a solid, to a landfill. And the landfill is, at the end of 50 years, is a permanent feature. It's like other landfills we're all familiar with. It's just a pile of dirt in an area that can never be used, or is, because of the nature of this material, is this something that will biodegrade into fluffy dirt, or is it going to be a smelly mess that needs to stay right there the end of 50 years? It's a landfill, so it's just,
So it does, and so you're asking for kind of an, for the applicant to describe what's gonna happen to this material over time.
does this stuff biodegrade? Does it become, it's not gonna have the problems like a regular landfill with the gassing off of things, right? Is it just inert?
I understand your question. So really, the contrast between this and a normal landfill, what does this material do over time versus what you experience with a conventional landfill? Is that
Right, because we're creating a landfill, I would like to know what happens to this landfill.
I mean, what happens to is it physically, or what happens? Because I mean, it's gonna be a landfill. It's not gonna. I mean,
Right.
It's just gonna sit there. So, but with the material inside, if it off gases or things like that.
Yeah, does it present any toxic hazard at the end of 50 years, or does this potentially just biodegrade? It's a permanent thing next to the river. I want to know what's going to happen to it in 50 years.
Got it. So yeah, I got it.
I think I
Jalen?
get the last one this time.
Okay.
Is this project 50-year project, or are they expecting this conditional use permit to continue beyond the current 50-year project? Because I don't think GP is planning to shut anything down in 50 years if they haven't already after 50 years. So are we talking about approving something that is going to continue ad infinitum, or are we approving something that will only extend through that 50 years and then will have to come back to us, or obviously not to us, but to the commission again?
Madam Chair, I think that may be more of a question for us than for GP, because it goes to the nature of our conditional use process and how conditional uses work. And so of course, this could be an invitation for them to respond to that question, but I feel obliged to at least say that it's my understanding that when we issue conditional uses here, and if the applicant is granted either administratively or through the planning commission a conditional use, and then if they go out and do it, so if they get whatever it is that they got permission to do, if they go achieve it, and then that right vests. There's no to the best of my knowledge that from a land use perspective, there's no time frame on that where the conditional use doesn't expire. And so that at least my response for you guys is that this is a permanent thing. There is no 50-year, we're gonna all somebody, if the current system stays the same, I presume I will not be alive to know. But in 50 years, let's say this thing gets built and it's there, and let's say it reaches its lifespan. If the land use system stays the same, there's nothing in our code that says we're going to revisit that site in 50 years to see what it's doing or not doing. There may be a whole different regulatory environment there. I mean, who knows what's going to happen between now and then, but there's nothing in our code that in effect asks that question, or really it's there, and it will be there, and nobody's suggesting this is a temporary holding place and that somehow it's going to go somewhere later. That is one thing that doesn't seem to be on the table. It will be entombed. That's my understanding, and if I'm incorrect, then I'd invite GP to correct me. It will stay there, and the conditional use will go on for years and years and years and years beyond that. Again, unless all of our land use system changes and our code changes or something like that. So I hope that's helpful to understand that there isn't some kind of a shelf life on this permit, and there won't be, if this is granted, there will not be another opportunity for us to have a say in this matter, either in the near term or the distant future.
Okay. John, did you have something you wanted to add?
I was just going to add, kind of respond to Commissioner Stratton's question. I mean, and sort of to Ano's too, physically the site will fill up. I mean, they've only identified a certain area that they're expanding landfill to. So I think I think what they're telling us is sometime in the next 50 years, that site fills up and they can't, you can only get so much material there and then they're done. I don't know if they're ever going to come back and ask for another application to expand the landfill further. I don't think they know. I think does that answer your question, Commissioner?
Yeah, that's my feeling, is that in 50 years, they expect it to be filled up and then they cap it or whatever they do. I mean, what people do with landfills is cap them. So they're essentially inert, anything that happens on top.
Yeah, and I don't believe it's going to, and that's the information we have. So does that address your question, Commissioner Stratton?
You're still muted.
Yeah, not really, but I understand where Ano's coming from on that. Every commissioner and every land use area is different, and this was something that I had run into previously, so that's why I wanted to bring it up.
Okay. All right.
And it may be under some land use actions at different times that things have a defined period of time that they're authorized. This is not one of those.
Okay, any further questions? So for staff or for GP, I mean, this is normally our applicant question kind of period. So I think at this point we're going to get some explanation of what's next on this application and procedures in our COVID meeting format here. Who's taking that? Is that Jerry or John that's going to talk about summarizing the next steps?
I think that's going to be Jerry.
Jerry? Okay.
Sounds good. So I appreciate the work that the planning commissioners have done this meeting. And so we need a motion to take care of the procedural aspect of this. That is the transition from this time to the next. And I think that I would recommend two motions. We take them one at a time. The first is, I think that I would like for this planning commission to consider moving that the record be left open for 7 days through the close of business on January 18th, 2021. During the 7-day period, the record will remain open to all parties for written rebuttal testimony, responses to questions posed by the commission or other direct testimony. And any request to keep the record open beyond this 7-day period would need to be made in writing and received before the close of business on January 18th, 2021. So that would be one matter. The second is, so we don't have to redo notice all over again, I think that it would be good to have a motion to reconvene the planning commission and to do so on January 25th, 2021 at the same time, 7 p.m.
Jerry, we're anticipating that deliberation would happen on the 25th, right?
It could. And if it doesn't, because someone's requested to keep the record open, then we would take care of how we're going to handle that. But I think we need to have a date certain to meet again so that we're all on board and we don't need to redo the notice.
And to be clear here, if there is any, this is the time that the general public, if they also have questions during, if this motion goes through, with the record being open, is when they would be submitting questions to the planning office.
Yeah.
That we would then receive at our next meeting.
They could submit questions or comments. Yeah.
Okay, does anyone have ready to make such the first motion about the January 18th, keeping the record open? Any takers on that, Judy?
Well, I'll move that we leave the record open until January 18th. Anyone who has questions needs to submit them for the record before January 18th.
Judy, can you also say that, I mean, you know, Jerry just wrote a rather precise, or read a rather precise motion. Could you incorporate by reference what Jerry just stated, or would you like me to restate it? Just then we really make, then I know we really got a clear.
Can we just refer to what Jerry stated?
I would be comfortable with that, but since you're making the motion, I'd like an explicit reference to, yeah, what Jerry just said, kind of thing.
Okay, and do you want me to start all over, or can I add that?
I think you just did.
Okay, I added it. I already added
it to my request, so Jerry, right, that's enough that because we have hard language here on the.
Yeah, why don't you, for the record, why don't you read that again?
I will be happy to read it one more time.
Go ahead and read it.
Or Josh can, either you or Josh, yeah?
I'll read it. I move that the hearing record be left open for 7 days through the close of business on January 18th, 2021. During the 7-day period, the record will remain open to all parties for written rebuttal testimony, responses to questions posed by the commission, or other direct testimony. Any request to keep the record open beyond the 7-day period must be made in writing and will be received before the close of business on January 18th, 2021.
Okay, you okay with that, Judy?
Yes, that's my motion.
That's your motion.
That's your motion. Okay, do I have a second on Judy's motion? Misty has seconded. Is there any further?
Okay.
Yeah, is there any further? Is there any further discussion on the motion? Okay, at this time, Josh, will you call the vote?
Andrew Bobbitt,
Yes.
Marcia Stratton,
Yes.
Judy Pelletier,
Yes.
Scarlett Kier,
Yes.
and Misty Lambrick.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, motion carries. And
The second motion.
this time, if anyone like to make a motion about reconvening on January 25th?
It's a shorter motion.
Okay, well, I'll make a motion that we reconvene the planning commission on January 25th.
At 7 p.m.
At
and
7 p.m.
in the virtual format. Okay.
In the virtual format.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Who is that?
Shaylin, oh,
Okay,
it was both of us. Scarlett.
all right.
So Josh, you're clear who made the motion and who seconded it, right?
Yes, sir.
Judy,
Okay, he's got it.
okay, Josh, call for the,
Josh,
Andrew
can you-
Bobbitt,
yes.
Marcia Stratton,
Yes.
Judy Pelletier,
Yes.
Scarlett Kier,
Yes.
and Misty Lambrick.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Josh. Okay. So that's it for this part of the public hearing. I did Before we adjourn, I want to know if you've all been paying attention to your screens. There's a new face. Anno, can you tell us about the new face on our screen?
I would be delighted. The Megan Hoff is our in the center, at least the center of my screen. Megan is our new planner, and this is the beginning of her second week, and I'm sure she feels completely overwhelmed by now. And she's young enough that she may be able, if I'm going to make a joke here, I don't know if it's a bad joke or a good joke, but if she may be, because of her age, she may be around if this thing gets approved. It's going to happen in 50 years. So we'll have to rely on her if the motion passes. So no, I'm very excited. We really needed another planner. Anyone that's understood our outfit and the volume of work coming at us, having someone on board to help John and I in an already very, very busy office is a godsend. And Megan has an outstanding background. Already, we're very pleased with how she's sort of taking up. But she's got right, Megan? You got a nice big learning curve. But between all of us, we're she's going to get some great training, and working with you is I'm sure going to be a real professional, a great experience for her. So again, thank you, Megan, for taking the job. And if you'd like to say anything, this is your moment.
Welcome.
Unmute yourself first. There you go.
I just want to say hello to all of the commissioners and thank you for including me this evening, and I look forward to working with all of you.
Welcome.
Thank you, welcome.
Thank you.
So again, thank you, Madam Chair, for that opportunity for us to introduce Megan.
All right. Do we have any other planning commission concerns? Nothing else going on? Everyone stay tight for the storm tonight. And we'll be looking for notice about our next meeting.
Thank you, everyone.
And if you have questions, just so you know, right, the point of the question and answer tonight was certainly to make sure that in public these questions were asked, and also to provide an opportunity for Georgia Pacific and their representatives to understand what your concerns are. Of course, conversation with staff can also occur between now and these hearings. I think you already know that, but I just want to make sure you understand that. So thank you, Madam Chair.
All right. We are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Night.